Have you ever felt like you've gone too far? Like you've made mistakes so heavy that no one could possibly welcome you back? Stay with me, because what I am about to share may change the way you see forgiveness forever. There was once a man with 2 sons. The younger of the 2 was restless, his eyes always wandering beyond the fences of his father's land. The weight of home felt like chains to him, and freedom whispered to him in the distance. One day, without hesitation, he walked into his father's house and demanded, "Give me my share of the inheritance now. I don't want to wait until you are gone. I want my life, my way, today." His father, heartbroken but silent, gave him what he asked for, and the boy left, carrying more wealth than wisdom, more pride than love. At first, life felt like a dream. He had friends who laughed with him, nights filled with wine and music, and the kind of reckless joy that burns bright but fades fast. The coins he carried were like fire in his pocket, bright but fleeting, and soon enough, they were gone. His so-called friends disappeared, the music ended, and silence wrapped around him like a prison. Hunger gnawed at him until even the scraps given to pigs looked like food fit for a king. It was there, in the mud and stench, that the truth struck him. He thought of home not as a place of shame, but of mercy. He whispered to himself, "Even my father's servants live better than this. If I go back, not as a son, but as a servant, maybe I can survive." So he rose, barefoot, thin, and broken, and turned toward the road he once walked with pride. Now pause for a moment. Where are you watching this story from right now? Are you in your car, on a long night shift break? Maybe sitting in a quiet room with your headphones on? Wherever you are, I want you to lean in, because this next part is not just a story, it's a mirror. As the boy dragged his feet toward home, his father was already watching the road. Day after day, the old man had stood there, scanning the horizon, and on that day, his patience became joy. He saw his son while he was still far away, and he ran. Yes, the father ran, his robe gathering dust, his heart beating faster than his old legs could carry. He threw his arms around the boy, kissed his dirt-streaked face, and wept. My son was dead, but now he lives. He was lost, but now he is found. The boy tried to confess, his voice cracked with shame. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father silenced him with mercy. He turned to his servants and shouted, "Bring the finest robe, place a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Prepare the feast for tonight, we celebrate. My son has come home." And so the house that once echoed with silence now rang with music and dancing. Forgiveness had written a new song, one that shame could never erase.
Now let me ask you, if you've ever felt unworthy, unloved, or too far gone, doesn't this story tell you something? That love runs faster than regret. That forgiveness waits longer than pride. That the shepherd's voice still calls. Even when you've wandered far, forgiveness is never cheap. It costs something. And in this story, it cost the father his dignity, his pride, and his years of waiting. Yet he gave it freely. But not everyone in that house rejoiced. The older brother was out in the fields, working hard under the burning sun. His hands were calloused, his back damp with sweat, his mind focused on duty. As he returned home, he heard music, laughter spilling out into the evening air. The rhythm of dancing feet, the scent of roasted meat filling the sky. Confused, he asked a servant, "What is happening?" And the servant replied, "Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fattened calf. Tonight, we celebrate." The elder brother's face darkened. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. He had spent years obeying, never demanding, never running. And yet no feast had ever been thrown for him. Rage burned through him as he refused to enter the house. The father, hearing of his anger, left the celebration to meet him outside. The same father who had run to embrace a prodigal now walked out to plead with a bitter son. "Look at me, father," the older son said, his voice shaking with resentment. "All these years I've served you. I never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who wasted your money on wild living comes back, you killed the fattened calf for him." The father's eyes softened, though they were heavy with grief. He placed his hands gently on the older son's shoulders and whispered, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate. For your brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. And there it is, the scandal of grace. The younger son sinned boldly, but was welcomed home. The older son obeyed faithfully, but still felt unseen. Both sons were lost in their own way. One was lost in rebellion, the other in bitterness. Yet the father loved them both. Now, let me pause again and bring this closer to you. Maybe you've lived your life like the younger son, chasing freedom that turned into emptiness. Or maybe you've been the older son, faithful, disciplined, but secretly resentful, wondering why no one celebrates your sacrifices. Which one feels closer to your story? Because here's the truth. Both sons needed the same thing. They needed a father who loved without conditions. They needed grace that could not be earned or deserved. And that's what makes this story timeless. It doesn't just speak about them. It speaks about us. When I told this story long ago, people were shocked. Some leaned in with tears in their eyes, realizing that even their deepest shame could be met with forgiveness. Others pulled back, offended, angry that grace could be given so freely to someone who had wasted everything. But isn't that the beauty of it? Grace is unfair. Grace is unearned. Grace is a gift. Now imagine this scene, not as a story of strangers, but as a reflection of your own life. How many times have you longed to be welcomed back, only to wonder if you'd be turned away? How many times have you felt like the one outside the house, angry, unrecognized, overlooked? Maybe right now, as you listen, you feel like both sons at once, torn between guilt and resentment, between running away and being left out. But the father in this story doesn't just wait. He runs. He doesn't just scold. He restores. He doesn't just love. He celebrates. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of love you've been searching for without even realizing it. So tonight, as you sit wherever you are, whether in your room, your car, or a crowded cafe, remember this. You are not beyond the reach of that kind of love. You are not too far gone, and you are not too overlooked. There is a feast waiting, and the invitation has your name on it. Some people hear that story and smile, because they know what it means to be welcomed home. Others hear it and struggle, because they know what it feels like to wait, to carry bitterness, to feel unseen. But forgiveness was never meant to be comfortable, it was meant to be powerful. Let me take you back to another night, a different lesson. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the crackle of fire. I sat with my friends, the ones who had walked with me for years. They had seen miracles, heard parables, but still wrestled with fear and doubt. That night, I told them something that unsettled their hearts. If you want to be great, you must be a servant. If you want to lead, you must kneel. They didn't understand. In their minds, greatness was about crowns and thrones, armies and victories. But I spoke of a different kind of kingdom, a kingdom where the last would be first, where the humble would rise, and where love would conquer fear. And to show them what I meant, I rose from the table, took a towel, and poured water into a basin. One by one, I knelt and washed their feet. Calloused feet, dusty from the road, scarred by labor. They shifted uncomfortably. Some were embarrassed. One even protested, "Lord, you will never wash my feet." But I looked at him and said softly, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." Why did I do it? Because love is not just spoken, it is lived. Forgiveness is not just declared, it is embodied. Humility is not weakness, it is strength wrapped in mercy. That night, I wanted them to see that true greatness is found in serving, not in being served. Now pause with me for a moment. Think about your own life. How often do we chase power, recognition, applause? How often do we measure greatness by how many people notice us? instead of how deeply we love those around us. Maybe you've worked in silence, never thanked, never celebrated. Maybe you've given your best, but it feels invisible. Let me tell you this. Your unseen kindness is not wasted. Every act of humility carries a weight greater than applause. It carries the power to change lives. As I knelt before each of them, their silence grew heavy. Some wept quietly, realizing the lesson was greater than the act. Others looked away, unable to bear the intimacy of such love. But all of them knew they were seeing something they would never forget. And here is the truth for you. When you love in humility, you become the strongest person in the room. When you forgive without being asked, you carry freedom others only dream of. When you serve without seeking recognition, you reflect a love that is greater than pride. Maybe right now, as you listen, you're remembering moments where pride kept you from forgiving. Maybe you're remembering times when bitterness whispered louder than compassion. Or maybe you're thinking of someone whose love shaped you quietly, without words, someone who bent low so you could stand tall. This is the way of the shepherd. Not to demand a throne, but to share a table. Not to seek recognition, but to wash feet. Not to wait for perfect people, but to love broken ones. And that way of living is still calling out to us today. So let me ask you again, where are you right now? Are you in the middle of your own storm, chasing recognition that never seems to satisfy? Or are you in a quiet place, finally ready to hear that love isn't about thrones or applause? It's about service, humility, and forgiveness. If so, then maybe these words aren't just stories from long ago. Maybe they're for you. Maybe they're the answer you've been waiting for but didn't know how to ask. Have you ever been caught in a storm so fierce that you thought it would swallow you whole? Waves taller than your courage, winds louder than your prayers. That's where this next story begins. We were on a boat, crossing the Sea of Galilee. The water had been calm when we set out, moonlight shimmering like silver across the surface. My friends laughed, their voices carrying into the night air. But storms have a way of arriving without warning, and this one came with fury. The wind roared, the waves rose, and our boat began to shudder under the weight of the sea. Darkness swallowed the horizon, and fear swallowed their hearts. They cried out, gripping the sides of the boat, their voices shaking, "We are going to drown." The storm mocked their cries, each wave higher than the last. In their panic, they turned to me. But where was I? As lightning flashed, they saw me, asleep in the stern, my head on a cushion. "Teacher," they shouted above the wind, "don't you care that we are perishing?" Their words were laced with desperation, the kind of fear that strips away pride and leaves only raw humanity. I rose slowly, the rain soaking my robe, the storm raging round me. I looked at the waves, at the wind, and then I spoke not with fear, but with authority. "Peace, be still." And just like that, the sea obeyed. The waves fell silent, the wind ceased its screaming, and the night returned to its stillness. My friends looked at one another, eyes wide with awe and trembling. "Who is this?" they whispered, "that even the wind and the sea obey him?" But here's what I wanted them to see. The storm outside was not the greatest danger, it was the storm inside. Fear is a louder storm than thunder. Doubt is a heavier weight than water. And sometimes, the greatest miracle is not calming the waves, but calming the heart. Now let me ask you, what storm are you in right now? Is it a storm of worry that keeps you awake at night? A storm of regret that whispers you'll never be forgiven? A storm of loneliness that makes the silence feel unbearable? Wherever you are watching this, whatever storm you are facing, remember this: storms do not last forever. And sometimes peace arrives in the most unexpected voice. That night, on the sea, my friends learned that fear can blind you to who is right beside you. They had seen miracles, yet in the storm, they doubted. Isn't that just like us? We can hear stories of hope, see glimpses of grace. Yet when the wind howls against our lives, we forget that peace is closer than we think. So let me tell you this clearly: your storm does not define you. Fear does not own you. And silence does not mean abandonment. Sometimes, the shepherd is resting because he knows the waves will not win. And when the moment comes, his voice will break the storm with words that still echo, "Peace, be still." So, if you are listening to me right now, and your life feels like a boat rocking in violent waves, hold on. The night will not last forever. And the one who brings peace is nearer than you think. Sometimes the greatest hunger is not for bread, but for hope. And sometimes the smallest offering becomes the greatest miracle. The crowd had gathered by the hillside. Thousands of them, men, women, children, drawn not by spectacle, but by a hunger they could not name. The air was warm, the ground dry, and the day long. They listened as I spoke. Their eyes wide, their hearts stirred. But as evening approached, their stomachs groaned louder than their spirits. My friends noticed first. "Send them away," they urged. "Let them go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But I looked at the weary faces, the little ones clinging to their mothers, the men who had traveled miles just to hear a word of hope. And I said, "You give them something to eat." They stared at me, incredulous. "We have nothing," they replied. "Just 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. What are they among so many?" I took the bread and fish into my hands. They were small, ordinary, humble. But miracles often begin with what seems insignificant. I looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and began to break the loaves. Piece by piece, basket by basket, the food multiplied. The bread did not end, the fish did not run out. My friends passed it through the crowd, and every single person ate until they were satisfied. When it was over, 12 baskets of leftovers remained more than we had begun with. That day, no one went home hungry. But the miracle was not just about filling their stomachs, it was about revealing a truth. That even in scarcity, abundance is possible. That even in weakness, strength is multiplied. That even in the smallest hands, greatness can unfold. Now pause and think. Maybe your life feels like those 5 loaves and 2 fish, too little, too small, too insignificant. Maybe you've looked at your own efforts and thought, what difference could this possibly make? But what if your little is enough when placed in greater hands? What if your story, your kindness, your gift, even if small, could feed thousands in ways you cannot imagine? The boy who offered his lunch that day probably never dreamed it would be remembered for centuries. He didn't bring much. He just brought what he had. And that was enough. Maybe right now, you are listening and thinking of the little you. Carry your talent, your strength, your love. It doesn't feel like enough. But I tell you, it is more than enough. Because when you give with a willing heart, you open the door for something greater than yourself. That hillside was filled with laughter, with children eating bread until crumbs stuck to their faces, with families leaning back in satisfaction, with songs rising as the sun sank low. It wasn't just a meal, it was a glimpse of abundance, a foretaste of what happens when scarcity meets generosity. And maybe this is the lesson for you tonight. Stop underestimating what you carry. Stop calling yourself too small, too weak, too little. The world is not waiting for you to be perfect. It is waiting for you to bring what you have. So let me ask you, what do you have in your hands right now? A dream, a skill, a moment of kindness. Don't dismiss it. Don't bury it. Offer it. Because even 5 loaves and 2 fish in the right hands can change the world. Not every wound can be seen. Some wounds are hidden beneath silence, carried in shadows, whispered only in the dark. But I met a woman once whose story proves that even the deepest pain can be healed. She had been suffering for 12 years. 12 long years of weakness, of bleeding, of doctors who promised cures but delivered disappointment. She had spent everything she owned seeking relief. But instead of healing, she found emptiness. People whispered about her, avoided her, treated her like she was unclean. Every day, she carried shame like a second skin. And every night, she cried herself to sleep, wondering if her life would ever change. But one day, she heard about me. She heard about the blind, who now saw, The lame who now walked, the broken who now stood whole. And a whisper of hope rose in her heart. If I can just touch the edge of his cloak, I will be healed. So when I passed through the crowd that day, she pressed in behind me. Hundreds surrounded me. Voices shouting, hands reaching. The noise of a restless crowd. But she pushed through, trembling, desperate, unnoticed. And with one final stretch, she touched the hem of my robe. In that instant, her body changed. Strength filled her veins. Life returned to her frame. The bleeding stopped. The pain ceased. She knew it immediately. She was healed. I felt it too. Power had gone out from me. I turned in the crowd and asked, "Who touched me?" My friends were confused. "Everyone is pressing against you," they said. "Why ask, who touched you?" But I knew this touch was different. This was not curiosity, was faith. The woman trembled, afraid she would be rebuked. But she fell to her knees and confessed, telling her story before everyone. I looked at her, my voice soft but firm. "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace, free from your suffering." And with those words, 12 years of shame lifted. 12 years of rejection dissolved. 12 years of sorrow ended. She stood not just healed in body, but whole in spirit. Now pause with me. What is your hidden wound? Maybe it's not visible to the world. Maybe it's not bleeding on the outside. Maybe it's inside you: fear, regret, loneliness, grief. Maybe it's something you've carried for years. Something that steals your strength day by day. And maybe you've tried everything: advice, distractions, yet the pain lingers. What if the answer isn't in trying harder, but in reaching out? What if healing isn't about being strong enough, but about being desperate enough to stretch your hand toward hope? That woman's touch wasn't powerful because it was strong. It was powerful because it was sincere. I want you to hear this. No wound is too old, no shame too heavy, no sorrow too deep. Healing is still possible. Sometimes all it takes is a touch, a moment of faith, a whisper of desperation turned into action. Some chains are not made of iron, some are made of fear, of guilt, of lies whispered so long that they feel like truth. I once met a man whose life was wrapped in chains you could not see, and yet, when freedom came, it was louder than the cries of demons. He lived among the tombs, far from the town, rejected by his people. His body was scarred from countless attempts to restrain him. They had bound him with chains, shackled his wrists, tied his ankles, but nothing could hold him. The torment inside was stronger than any lock. Day and night he roamed the hills, crying out, cutting himself with stones. His voice was a haunting echo that no one dared to approach. When I stepped onto the shore, he came running, his eyes wild, his body trembling, his soul torn in 1,000 directions. Falling at my feet, he shouted, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Don't torment me." The voices inside him were not his own. They screamed, they begged, they resisted. But I looked at him, not at the chaos, not at the scars, but at the man buried beneath the torment. I spoke with authority. "Come out of him." The darkness raged, but it could not resist. Like shadows chased away by the dawn, the torment fled. And there he was, silent, still, free. The man who once lived among tombs now sat at my feet, clothed and in his right mind. The people of the town came, astonished, afraid. They had known him as a madman, a danger, a lost cause. But now they saw him whole. They begged me to leave, fear gripping their hearts more than wonder. But the man who had been healed begged to come with me. I looked at him and said, "Go home to your people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." And so he did, his voice no longer the cry of torment, but the song of freedom. Now pause and reflect. Maybe your chains aren't visible. Maybe you're not living among tombs. But you know what it's like to be trapped by addiction, by shame, by lies that replay in your head every night. Maybe you've felt unclean, unwanted, too broken to be near others. Maybe You've even believed that freedom is for everyone else but you. But hear me, your chains are not stronger than mercy. Your demons are not louder than truth. Your shame is not deeper than love. If a man forgotten in the tombs could be restored, so can you. Think about this, the very people who avoided him, who feared him, who chained him, now had to face him free. Sometimes freedom itself scares people, because it proves that the impossible is possible. And maybe that's why you hesitate to believe. You wonder if people would even accept the new you. But remember, the shepherd does not wait for you to clean yourself. He meets you in your brokenness, in your chains, in your tombs, and his voice is stronger than the lies you've carried. So, let me ask you, what chains are you carrying tonight? Fear of failure, the weight of mistakes, a secret addiction you've never spoken aloud. Whatever it is, don't let it define you. Because freedom is not just a story told long ago, a promise still alive today. Some wounds are carried in silence, not in the body, but in the heart. And sometimes the weight of loss is heavier than stones. I met two sisters, once whose story was soaked in grief, but out of their sorrow came a truth, stronger than death itself. Their brother had died. His name was Lazarus, and he was loved deeply not only by his sisters Mary and Martha, but by me. When I arrived at their village, 4 days had already passed. The house was filled with mourners, the air thick with sorrow. Martha came to meet me first, her eyes red from weeping. Her voice trembled as she said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Her words carried both faith and pain. She believed in me, yet grief wrapped her heart in thorns. I looked at her and said, "Your brother will rise again." She nodded, misunderstanding, thinking I meant the final day of resurrection. But I spoke more plainly. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. Mary came next, falling at my feet, her sobs shaking her body. Seeing her weep, and the mourners with her, my spirit ached. Tears filled my own eyes, and I wept with them. Yes, I wept, because love does not stand unmoved in the face of loss. We went to the tomb, a cave sealed with a stone. I said, "Take away the stone." Martha hesitated, whispering, "Lord, by now there will be a stench. He has been there for days." But I reminded her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" The stone was rolled away. The crowd held their breath, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. I lifted my eyes and prayed aloud, not for myself, but for those listening, that they might believe. Then, with a voice that carried through death itself, I called out, "Lazarus, come forth." And he did. Wrapped in grave clothes, his steps unsteady, Lazarus emerged from the darkness of the tomb. Gasps and cries erupted as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. I turned to them and said, "Unbind him and let him go." The crowd rejoiced, but more than that, they were changed. Grief had been shattered by life, despair replaced by hope. And Mary and Martha held their brother again. Their tears now mingled with laughter. Now pause for a moment. Maybe you have lost someone. Maybe grief has built a tomb inside your chest, sealing you in darkness. Or maybe it's not death, you mourn, it's a dream that died. A relationship that ended, a hope you buried long ago. Whatever it is, you know what it feels like to stand at the edge of something lifeless, and wonder if it will ever breathe again. But hear me, even what seems dead is not beyond the reach of life. Even what feels sealed can be opened. Even what has been gone for days or years can be restored. When I said, "I am the resurrection and the life," it wasn't just about Lazarus. It was about every broken heart, every buried hope, every soul suffocated by loss. It was a promise that life is stronger than death, hope stronger than despair, love stronger than the grave. So, ask yourself, what tomb have you been standing before? What stone feels too heavy to move? Maybe tonight, as you hear these words, it's time to believe that the stone can roll away, that life can return, that laughter can rise from tears, Because the voice that called Lazarus still speaks. And when it does, even the dead things in your life cannot stay buried. There is no wound deeper than betrayal. To be hurt by enemies is one thing, but to be wounded by a friend, by someone you trusted, cuts in a way nothing else can. I know, because I lived it. The night was cool, the sky heavy with stars, but the weight in my chest was heavier still. I sat at the table with my closest friends, men who had walked with me, laughed with me, heard every word I had spoken. Yet even in that circle, betrayal was sitting at the table. I told them plainly, one of you will betray me. Their faces shifted with shock. One by one they asked, is it I? And when Judas dipped his bread with mine, the truth was clear. Still, I looked at him not with anger, but with sorrow. I said, what you are about to do, do quickly. He left into the night. And the darkness outside was no darker than the shadow in his heart. Betrayal is not just about losing trust, it's about losing a piece of yourself. When someone you love turns against you, it shakes the very ground beneath your feet. And maybe you know that feeling. Maybe someone you trusted, friend, lover turned their back on you, and the wound still bleeds when you think about it. But here is what I want you to understand. Betrayal does not define you. It exposes the choices of others, not your worth. Judas' kiss was not the end of MIT, was the beginning of something greater. What others intend for harm can still be turned into purpose. That night, I also told Peter, the one who had sworn he would never deny me, before the rooster crows. You will deny me 3 times, he protested loudly. Never. Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. But before the night ended, fear gripped him. 3 times, he denied even knowing me. And when he heard the rooster crow, his heart broke, and he wept bitterly. Think about that. One betrayed me for silver, another denied me out of fear. Both wounds cut deep. Yet both men had a choice afterward. Judas chose despair, and his story ended in tragedy. Peter chose repentance, and his story was rewritten in grace. Maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe you've been denied, abandoned, left standing alone by people you thought would always stay. But your story does not have to end in despair. Like Peter, you can rise again. Your failure is not final. Your weakness is not the end. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. The people who left you, the ones who broke your trust, they don't have the power to end your story. That power belongs to the one who can rewrite even betrayal into redemption. So ask yourself, will you let the wound of betrayal bury you? Or will you let it break you open into something greater? Will you let denial define you? Or will you choose the path of restoration? Because here's the truth. You are not the sum of what others have done to you. You are not the mistakes of yesterday. You are not the betrayal that broke your heart. You are more. And there is still purpose waiting for you, even after the deepest wounds. Every story I've shared with you of sons and fathers, of storms and healing, of chains broken and graves opened, carries one truth. Love never gives up. And now, it is your turn to decide what you will do with that truth. You've walked with me through the dusty roads of Galilee, sat at the tables where bread was broken, stood by the tomb where life returned, and heard the cries of the forgotten, set free. These stories are not just history. They are mirrors. Each one reflects something inside your fears, your regrets, your hopes, your hunger for something greater. Maybe you saw yourself in the prodigal son, running far from home, but longing to be embraced again. Maybe you saw yourself in the older brother, faithful yet bitter, waiting for recognition that never came. Maybe you saw yourself in the storm-tossed boat, terrified, wondering if peace will ever arrive. Or maybe you felt the ache of Mary and Martha, grieving something you thought was gone forever. Wherever you found yourself, know this: you are not alone. The shepherd's voice still calls. And it calls, not because you are perfect, but because you are loved. Loved in your running, loved in your bitterness, loved in your storm, loved in your grief, loved even in your betrayal, your denial, your shame. So let me speak directly to you. No, yes, you. Wherever you are watching this from. Maybe it's late at night, and the glow of your phone is the only light in the room. Maybe you're driving parked in silence, listening with tears you didn't expect. Maybe you're surrounded by people but still feel alone. Hear me, this is not an accident. These words are reaching you for a reason. Don't bury your story in shame. Don't let fear convince you it's too late. Don't let bitterness chain you outside the celebration. There is still a place at the table, still a robe waiting, still a feast being prepared with your name on it. And here's the question only you can answer. Will you turn back toward home? Will you trust that forgiveness is greater than regret? That love is louder than fear? That life is stronger than death? The invitation has been written across every story I've told. It is not forced, not demanded, not earned. It is offered. Offered to the tired, the broken, the ashamed, the forgotten. Offered to you. So, as this story closes, let me leave you with this simple truth. No matter where you are, no matter what you've done, no matter how far you've gone, you are still loved. You are still seen, and you are still called. And if these words stirred something in you, don't keep it quiet. Share it. Tell someone. Pass the story forward. Because light is not meant to be hidden, and hope is not meant to be hoarded. Now, before this video ends, I'll ask you for one small act of faith. If these words touched your heart, if you felt even a spark of hope, tap the like button. Leave a comment about what spoke to you most. And share this video with someone who needs it. Not for me, but for the one still waiting to hear that love never gives up. This is the shepherd's voice, and it is still speaking, still calling, still waiting for you.